Masechet Nedarim Daf Lamed He. We begin with a really fundamental question about the status of something that's prohibited by a neder. Be'amine Rava Rav Nachman, yesh me'ila bekunamot o la? Rava asks Rav Nachman, is there a law of me'ila regarding a kunam? Kunam being a nickname for korban. So if I say this bread is prohibited to me as a korban, that's the language of a neder. So when I say like a korban, well, does that mean really like a korban? Really like something hekdesh? If there's something that belongs to the Bet HaMikdash, well, whether it's an actual animal that's going to be a korban, or anything, any item that belongs to the Bet HaMikdash, or that someone donates and is now the property of the Bet HaMikdash, there's a law of me'ilah. That means if someone takes that for themselves, uses it for their own personal benefit, then that's a serious violation. Me'ilah means you have to pay what you benefited plus a fifth and bring a korban. And so that's the question. When I say this loaf is prohibited to me like a korban, am I just saying I'm making a prohibition? I'm not allowed to use it. I'm just comparing it to a korban. Just like a korban is prohibited, this is also prohibited, but not in the same category. It's just a prohibition. Or is it actually creating a prohibition that is similar enough to a korban and hekdesh that if I violate it, I would violate the law of me'ilah and have to bring korban and pay an extra fifth? That's the question. Amar le'etini tuha. Rav Nachman answers, we have an answer from the Mishnah that we learned previously. Makom shenotlin aleha sachar tipol hana'a la hekdesh. In our Mishnah, we mentioned the case where, let's say, we are prohibited to each other. To make it easy, right? You cannot have benefit from me, I can have benefit from you. I found your wallet in the street. The Mishnah said, I am permitted to return it to you because it's already yours. And if we live in a place where it is customary that the owner of the object pays compensation for the lost time and effort of the one who found it, in that case, the owner cannot give that to the money to the finder because the finder cannot have any benefit from it. Or even if there's no value, let's say he rejects it and says, no, I don't want the payment, right? So it's okay. In that case, the Mishnah said that the owner cannot keep the money because the owner is prohibited by a vow from benefiting from the finder, and if he keeps that compensation for himself, then he is having benefit. He has benefit from the finder, and therefore, since he cannot keep it, what does he do with it? He gives it to hekdesh. Now, it's interesting it gives it to hekdesh. Just because he can't benefit from it doesn't mean that's necessarily hekdesh. There is another possibility. In other cases where you can't benefit from something, the halacha will say, throw it into the Dead Sea, right? Just get rid of it, destroy it. But here we see that we say it belongs to hekdesh. Lememra ki hekdesh. And so Rav Nachman says, I'm going to learn from this that money is like hekdesh, because I said it's prohibited to me as a vow, and now you have that money that you were going to give to me, but I refused it. That money is prohibited to the owner of the item that was returned, prohibited as a vow. And the Mishnah equates that prohibited item with this vow to hekdesh, and therefore, just like hekdesh, something that's consecrated, if someone violated it, that would be a law of me'ilah. So too, any kunam, anything that you make a vow that is like a kunam, like a korban, also will be me'ilah. Okay, pretty good and interesting proof. However, next line we say, actually, this may be a machloket between two Tanaim, right? We're accepting the proof from our Mishnah, according to which a neder of a korban, that something is like a korban, yes, it would be me'ilah, but that may only be one opinion. And there's another Tanaitic opinion that would disagree. Ketana'eh, we're going to see both of them in this baraita. Kunam kikar zo hekdesh v'achala ben hu ben chavero ma'al. Lefichach yesh pidyon. All this is going to be the opinion of Rabbi Meir as opposed to Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says that if a person comes and says, this loaf is a korban, is kunam, is like korban, hekdesh, and it's prohibited to everyone, like hekdesh. If he eats it, or if anyone else eats it, they are liable to me'ilah. So even though he made it just as a vow that it's a korban that's prohibited, like he's not actually making hekdesh, he just says like hekdesh. Nevertheless, it is prohibited. Now that has a leniency also, that if something actually, even it actually is hekdesh, you can redeem it for money, and the consecration, holiness transfers from the item to the money, right? Like a person, I could say, I am going to consecrate myself to the Bet HaMikdash. It doesn't mean I have to deliver myself to the Bet HaMikdash. They don't need me. But rather, I would pay the amount that I'm worth to the Bet HaMikdash. And so, yes, it is fully like Hekdesh, and there would be like Me'ilah, liable to Me'ilah, and there would be Pidyon. However, even according to the Bimeir, if someone makes a more limited prohibition and says this loaf is prohibited to me like Hekdesh, as a Qurban, and I eat it, then huma'al, I would violate me'ilah. Chavedo lo ma'al, but I made no prohibition against anybody else. I only said it's prohibited to me. So therefore, anyone else is permitted to eat it. Lefichach en la pijon divred bimeir. So in this case, even though if I eat it, I would be liable to me'ilah and have to pay the extra fifth and bring korban, because it's not universally prohibited. Therefore, it's not fully like Hekdesh. Because it's not fully like Hekdesh, it doesn't have the leniency that I could redeem it for money. So in this case, there would be no possibility of redemption. So that's just an interesting halacha according to the Bimeir. If I make something prohibited to everyone like Hekdesh, then it also has the benefit that I can redeem it like Hekdesh. But if I make it only prohibited to myself like Hekdesh, then while the prohibition is more limited and you can eat it, but I would not have the benefit of redemption. Anyway, according to the Bimeir, we see that the prohibition does trigger a me'ilah transgression. Whereas Chachamim omerim ben kach or ben kach lo ma'al lefi she'en me'ilah b'kunam. Chachamim say doesn't matter whether I make it prohibited to everyone or just to myself. There is no me'ilah because kunam, that language or any language comparing, saying this is prohibited like a korban, like a kunam. All these things that they make it prohibited, but it's a standalone neder prohibition. And it would not transgress me'ilah. And so you see here, there is, in fact, a machloket. Our Mishnah, if you accept this proof, would be the opinion of Bimeir, but Chachamim would disagree. Okay, a related note, statement. Amar le Rav Acha de Rav Avya le Rav Asher. Ki kari alecha untana lo bematana mima'al. If I say, my loaf of bread is prohibited to you as a kunam. Okay, so now it's going to be prohibited to you. But now I give it to you as a gift. And maybe I tell you, maybe I don't tell you, that I just made it prohibited to you. And then you accept the gift. Who is liable to me'ilah? Is it me because I gave it to you? Or is it you because you received it? So that's the question. Lim'ol matnoten ha la'asira aleh. If you're going to say that it's that the one giving the gift is the one that commits me'ilah, that can't be because he has no prohibition upon himself. I just said this loaf, I own the loaf. I said this loaf is prohibited to you. I have no prohibition against the loaf. I could eat it. I could do whatever I want with it. So how can I violate me'ilah if I have no prohibition upon myself? Therefore, it can't be that I violate. But rather, what? Lim'ol mekabel. So does that mean that you violate? You're the receiver. I made this loaf korban to you. Then I give it to you, and you received it. Well, can that be? Yachol de'amar hetera b'ayati surav la b'ayati. The receiver can say, wait a second. I only wanted to accept something permitted. I would never have accepted it if I knew it was prohibited. Right? Let's say I don't tell you. If I do tell you, presumably you're not going to take it. But even if I don't tell you, right, afterwards and I say, oh, by the way, I made a prohibition. So then you'll say, wait, when I accepted it assuming it was permitted. I would never have accepted it knowing it was prohibited. So it's like a mekach ta'ut. It's like a false accepting something. It's like a transaction under false pretenses, and therefore I never actually did accept it, and it's not mine, and therefore I would not be liable. So all that is the question of Rav Acha that he asked Rav Asher. Which one should it be? Rav Asher answered, Mekabel ma'al lichesheyosi. He says, you're right. The giver is not going to transgress because he has no prohibition. And even the receiver will not transgress the second he takes it because he is not accepting ownership over it if he would not have accepted ownership if he knew it was prohibited. But lichasheyosi, which means when he uses it, when he eats it or does something with it, then he will violate me'ilah. Shekol hamosi me'od hekdesh lecholin kasavur shehel cholin hu mo'el af ze mo'el. Because that's the general rule with me'ilah. Anyone who takes money that belongs to hekdesh and uses it, spends it in any way, even though he's thinking that it's chulin, he still violates me'ilah. In other words, me'ilah is transgressed even when you do so unwittingly, right? I didn't realize I have some money in the drawer, and I thought it was regular chulin money, and I spent it, and then, right, I come home, and my friend tells me, oh, that drawer, that was a kodesh money. So even though I didn't realize, nevertheless, that's me'ilah. In fact, you only bring the korban if you do it bishogeg. And so, and that case, once I eat the loaf, I can't say, oh, if I had known it was prohibited, I wouldn't have eaten it. Right? You can do that for a transaction to say I would not have accepted it. But once it's used, once it's eaten, that's it. Then me'ilah is triggered, is transgressed, and so that's Rav Asher's answer. All right, now it brings us to the next Mishnah. This Mishnah is continuing a list from the previous Mishnah. What items are permitted even if there's a vow against benefit from one another. So in this example, let's say I say I'm not going to give you any. You cannot have any benefit from me. Okay, so I can't do you any. I can't give you a gift. I can't do you any favors. But here's some more exceptions. I can return a lost item to you, as we saw last time. I can give machasita shekel on your behalf. And here's more items. V'torem et tirumato masrotav leda'ato. I can go ahead and separate tiruman maaser from your produce with your knowledge. If, let's say, we're neighbors and you're away, and you say, oh, I'm not around, but I really want to separate tiruma and maaser on my produce so that it'll be all ready when I get back. Maybe you're going to get back and won't have time before Shabbat to do it. And so you call me and say, can you go to my field and my granary and separate to the Maaser for me? And I'll say, listen, I made a vow that you cannot have any benefit from me. Nevertheless, it's permitted because I'm not giving you anything. I'm not giving you any money or any monetary benefit, but rather I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm helping you do a mitzvah. And so therefore it's permitted, right? This grain that I separate will go to the Leviim, will go to the Kohanim, and that's permitted. And let's say I am a Kohen, and as a Kohen, why don't we get into a fight and I say, you cannot have any benefit from me. And now you come to the Bet HaMikdash one day because you're a Zav. And a Zav, after he becomes pure and he waits his days of impurity, he brings some birds, or a Zavah, same thing, or a Yoledet, a woman who gives birth after a certain amount of time. She brings also her sacrifices and other chataot and ashamot that people bring. And so you come and say, hey, Mr. Kohen, can you offer these birds on my behalf? And even though, and it is permitted, even though I said, I'm not going to give you any benefit, you cannot have any benefit from me, this is permitted. And the Gemara will explain that the Kohen is working for the Bet HaMikdash. He's working for Shamayim. He's not working for you. He's not doing you a favor. He's doing his job. Similar to, if you got into a fight with a government clerk, and the clerk says, I'm not going to give you any benefit. But if you go to that office, that government office, and you give him a form he has to process, he still has to do it because he works for the government. That's his job. And so he's not doing it for you as a favor. He's doing it because he's employed to do so. So these are all permitted. And the last one, if I'm a teacher and I say I'm not going to give you any benefit, right? You're not allowed to have any benefit from me, but then you come to my class, right? You listen to my shiur, or you come and ask me if I could teach you some Torah. That's permitted, whether it be midrash, that means exposition of Pesukim, explanation of Pesukim from Tanakh, halachot, like Mishnayot, agadot, which would be stories and moral teachings. So all these different genres, all that's permitted. the basic fundamental law is that Torah Sivilanu Moshe, Morasha Kilat Yaakov. The Torah is an inheritance for all Jews. It's free. That's one of the reasons it was given in Har Sinai, in the desert at Har Sinai, not in anyone's land, because just like everything in the desert is free for anyone to come and take, so too Torah has to be free. For this reason, one is not allowed to charge money to be a teacher. How do teachers get paid? Okay, they have to get paid in other ways for not doing other things, for babysitting and maybe for grading tests and things like that. But actual teaching is not something that you can be compensated for. It has to be free. This is a mitzvah. And therefore, even though I say, you cannot have any benefit from me, I'm allowed to teach you. However, this does not apply to Tanakh teaching. That would not be allowed. The reason here, the Gemara will get into this further, is because for teaching Tanakh, one is allowed to charge money, and therefore, since that's something that one can be compensated for, that is considered a full monetary benefit. So, if I made a vow that I cannot teach, that I cannot give you any benefit, then no, I cannot teach you Tanakh, but I can teach you these other subjects of Torah She'Ba'al Peh. Aval melamedu et banav et benotav mikra. However, even in the case of mikra, if I make a vow that you cannot have any benefit from me, I can't teach you Tanakh, but I am allowed to teach your children Tanakh, right? Because they're not included in my prohibition, and so I can teach them. It's very significant here that it mentions both sons and daughters in this category of studying Tanakh, and it is based on this that Hanambam makes a distinction between Torah She'Ba'al Peh and Torah She'Bichtav, and says that if a father wants to teach his daughters Tanakh, that is permitted. And so that's why in most places girls do learn Tanakh, pretty much in all places, everywhere. Girls learn Tanakh, Torah She'Bichtav, even though for Torah She'Ba'al Peh, that's a subject of more controversy. Okay. Now we have a question. Ha kahane shiluchet didan havu or shiluchet dishmaya. Going back to the Mishnah regarding if the Kohen says, you cannot have any benefit from me, but yet a person can come and bring his korbanot, his birds, if he's a zav, to the Kohen. So because we mentioned that, that's going to be an answer, used as an answer to this question. The Kohanim, are they our messengers? When I come bring something to a Kohen and say, hey, can you offer this on my behalf? Is he acting as my messenger? Or is he Shiluchei Dishmaya? Is he a messenger of heaven? He's commanded by the Torah. This is your Kohen, this is your job, and so you're doing the messengership from heaven. What would be a practical difference? It would be if a Kohen has a vow against him that he cannot benefit other people, or this person in particular. If you say the Kohen is our messenger, and I made a vow that this Kohen, I will not get any benefit from this Kohen, well then, this would be a benefit because he's my messenger, and it would be prohibited. But if you say that the Kohen is a messenger of heaven, then even though there's a vow that he cannot give any benefit to me, nevertheless, I can give him my korban and say, can you do this for me? Because he's not doing me a favor, he's doing his job that he's called upon by the Torah to do. So what's the answer? Tashema ditnan makriv alav ki nezavin. No, we have an answer from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says it's permitted. Even though there's a vow and he cannot benefit me, I can still bring, if I'm a zav, I can still bring him my birds to make a korban. There you go. If you would say he's my messenger, he's giving me benefit, it wouldn't be allowed. Therefore, it is in fact shiluchei dishmaya. Okay, but then we ask, if so, then why doesn't the Mishnah say that a Kohen can bring any korban? Why does it specify just a few types of korbanot, the birds of a zav, of a zava, of a yoledet? Say any korbanot. Rather, it must be that in general, a Kohen would be my messenger and doing me a favor if I bring him a korban shelamim or whatever other types of korbanot that I want to bring. He would be doing me a favor, and that would be prohibited. Instead, the Mishnah only specifies these. What do they have in common? That they have in common that these people, a zav or a zava or yoledet, they are impure. Not through any fault of their own necessarily. It's not that they did a sin, but they're impure and they have to go through a purification process, waiting, mikveh, and they have to bring these korbanot in order to achieve full kapara so that they can be fully tahor, like if they want to eat kodashim. So this is simply a technicality that they have to go through. And so it's only in these cases where the Kohen is not doing me a favor, he's simply doing his job, because this is a category of mechusareh kapara korbanot that will help the person, the zav zava, achieve full purification. And how do we know that this category is different from others? Damar Rabbi Yochanan, hakol srichin da'at chus memechusareh kapara, she'adam mevi korban al banav al benotav haketanim, shenemar zot torat hazav ben gadol ben katan. Rabbi Yochanan in fact taught that for all types of korbanot, the person bringing it has to have knowledge. If I'm bringing korban hatat because I did something wrong, or korban todah, whatever it is, I have to know that I'm bringing it and what I'm bringing. Except for mechusareh kapara, there you do not need the knowledge of the one who's bringing it. What's a proof that you don't need the knowledge of the one bringing it? Because a person can bring a korban, this type of korban, for his sons or his daughters who are children. Children, right? They became zav and they need the korbanot. The father can bring it on their behalf. As it says, zot torat hazav, the word Torah comes to include others, not only for oneself, but even for others, whether they are adults or children. Now, the fact that they're children means that they don't have da'at, they don't have sufficient mindset to know what they're doing, that they're bringing it, but someone else can do it on their behalf. So what you see from here is that just as this category of korbanot does not need knowledge of the one who's bringing it, it's just an automatic thing. You have to just check off this box and it has to be brought. Therefore, this type of korban, the Kohen has to do for a person because that's his job. He has to do this, that's his job, because the person needs kapara, and therefore, even if I cannot have any benefit from the Kohen, he still has to bring my zav birds as part of the technicality. But if it was a different type of korban, so you see from here that mechusareh kapara or of a different nature, you're not doing it for me, you can't be doing it on my behalf, because it works even if I don't have knowledge that you're doing it, right? That kid might be at home, have no idea that his father's bringing a korban for him, and it still works. And so or anyone else, so if it works, even though I have no knowledge, so obviously it's not because I asked you, I appointed you, you're not my shaliach. So for mechusareh kapara, there you're acting on behalf of heaven. I'm get benefit that I'm tahor now, but well, that's your job, you have to process this for me. Whereas other korbanot, that's not true. Other korbanot, I do have to have knowledge that I'm bringing this korban hatat, that I sinned and I'm bringing it because of that, and therefore any other type of korban would be that you are my messenger, and therefore if I made a vow that I cannot have benefit from you, that would not be allowed. All right. So so we rejected that proof, therefore, right? Because if it was really therefore we cannot prove from this Mishnah that across the board a Kohen is acting on behalf of Shamayim. That's not true. Not because this Mishnah is only talking about a small subset. Fine, in that subset of mechusareh kapara, he's working on behalf of Shemaya, but in other korbanot, not necessarily so. Okay, Ela me'ata Rabbi Yochanan. We have a question now about Rabbi Yochanan himself. He learned from the word zot torat that will include both adults and children. Hold on, Rabbi Yochanan. Zot torat hayoledet. It also says the same phrase. Zot torat, like it says with zav, it says yoledet. How about over there? Are you going to apply the same derasha and say ben ketana, ben gedola, ketana bat ledahi? But the problem is, yoledet, a woman who just gave birth has to bring certain korbanot, and so you're going to say zot torat. That includes both if she's a child or an adult. But can a child give birth to a child? Can a minor give birth? we know from another halacha that this is not allowed. I like when the rabbis are deciding something about science, that they don't, ask a scientist, but they look to halacha itself that includes the scientific knowledge. והתנא רבבי כמד רב נחמן, 3 נשים משמשות במוח, קטנה ומעוברת ומניקה, קטנה שמא תתאבד ותמות. We have this baraita that was said before Rav Nachman that says 3 women are permitted or even must use a contraceptive cloth that reabsorbs. And the 3 are a minor, a pregnant woman, and someone who's nursing. Now, a pregnant woman or someone who's nursing, it is dangerous for them to get pregnant. They could get pregnant. A pregnant woman cannot get pregnant scientifically, but they seem to think that they could get pregnant and have twins, and then there would not be enough room in the womb, and then that would harm the pregnancy. Or someone who is nursing, who is less likely to get pregnant but could, and then that would stop the milk, and that would put the live infant in danger. And therefore the rabbi said one could and should use contraceptive for those cases. Now, for a minor, they also said a minor should use it. Why? Because she may become pregnant and she will die. It's possible for a minor to become pregnant, but it's not possible for her to give birth to a live, healthy baby. And therefore, since it's impossible, there would never be a case of a yoledet, because a minor cannot get pregnant and give birth. And therefore, she would never be a yoledet. So Rabbi Yochanan, how are we going to interpret this verse? How are you going to apply the zotorat yoledet if it cannot apply to a ketana? And his answer is, Ahi Torat Yoledet ben Pikachat ben Shota. Rabbi Yochanan can have a similar derasha, not for a minor, but rather that the laws of bringing this korban for a newborn mother apply both whether she is fully competent or even if she is mentally incompetent, she still would have to bring this korban. Sheken adam evi korban alishto shota. How would that work? The husband would bring it on her behalf. So it would be the same idea that this is someone who is michusar kapara, and even though she doesn't know she's bringing it, nevertheless someone can bring it on her behalf, because it's within this category of sacrifices that one does not need to have knowledge that they themselves are bringing it. And how do we know that's true? Adam evi korban ashir al ishto v'chol korbanot shechayevet shekach kotev la v'acharut ti'it lich alai min kadmat de. Now, Rabbi Yehuda in this baraita taught that a person brings a korban of a rich person for his wife. There are various categories of korbanot where, depending on your income level, you'd bring either an animal or a bird or a meal offering. Korban yoledet is one of them. A wealthy woman after childbirth brings an animal and a bird, whereas a poor person brings 2 birds. And so even if the woman herself does not have a lot of money in her own name, but if she marries someone wealthy who can afford the animal, then he can bring off on her behalf a korban ashir, and any other. That's true for any other korbanot that she would be obligated for. So we see from this that the husband can take care of the korbanot of his wife, who is a yoledet. And so therefore, whether she is competent or she is mentally incapacitated, he can bring it on her behalf. And so that's what Rabbi Yochanan, that's what he would learn from this. So yes, true, it's not talking about a minor, but we'd be talking about shota. And we know this is true, that the husband is obligated for his wife's korbanot, because it says in the ketubah that the responsibility of any financial obligation that you have from now or even from before this is incumbent upon me, right? I'm going to take care of all of your financial obligations. This happens a lot when, so someone is in graduate school and her father was paying for her, and now her husband takes over the tuition bills. Okay, but this would include also the sacrificial bills that he takes over and he takes care of them. Okay, so we see therefore that this our Mishnah is not a proof that the Kohen is an agent of heaven for all cases, but only for a subset of these sacrifices that are mechusare kapara. And so because in those cases the person can't be an agent, because the person giving it doesn't necessarily even know that is being brought on their behalf. But for any other korbanot, this is the question would still be open. For other korbanot, it may very well be that it is in fact the messengership of the person bringing that korban, and therefore, if there was a vow against the benefiting from the kohen, then the kohen in those cases may not be allowed to bring the korban. We're now going to challenge this conclusion that a kohen is a messenger of heaven only for this michusare kapara. It looks like he's actually a messenger for all types of korbanot from the following Tosefta. Metiv Rav Shimi bar Abba, im haya kohen, yizrok alav dam chatato vedam ashamo. If a person who makes a vow is a kohen, and he makes a vow that he's not going to do anything good, give any benefit to me, and then I bring him my korban, nevertheless he is permitted to sprinkle the blood of a chatat offering or of an asham offering on my behalf. Even though he's not allowed to give me any benefit, it is still permitted. What you see from here is, assuming that this chatat and asham is referring to any chatat and any asham, that means for all korbanot, he's not doing it as my messenger, but rather he's doing it as a messenger of heaven. And so we see from here, from this Tosefta, that the conclusion that we just had, that maybe only in this category of michusare kapara, that's where he's a messenger from heaven. But in other ones, he would be a messenger of the person bringing it. From here we see, no, he's allowed to sprinkle the blood for any type of korban. So that means for all type of korbanot, he's a messenger from heaven, right? And we answer, not necessarily. Dam chatato shel mesorah v'dam ashamo shel mesorah. Dichtib zot tiheh torat mesorah ben gadol ben katan. No, this Tosefta may very well be talking not about any chatat and asham, but only the chatat and asham that a mesorah brings. A mesorah also is mechusar kapara, is lacking full atonement, lacking full amount of purity until he brings these sacrifices. And for him also it says Torah mesorah, and just as we learned this word before, the generalization means whether he is an adult or a child. And if he's a child, then that means the child cannot make a messenger. He's not doing it with his knowledge, and yet it works. So therefore, in the case of mesorah, like zav, like Yoledet, there the Kohen is acting as an agent of heaven, but this does not tell us anything about the other types of sacrifices, and so we still leave the question unanswered. We're going to try one last proof. Tenan, HaKohanim shepigelu b'mikdash mezidin hayavin, hashogegin peturin, ela shepigulan pigul. Mishnah teaches that a Kohen who makes something pigul in the mikdash, he's offering us a sacrifice, he's doing shechita or taking the blood, and while he's doing that, he has in mind, I'm going to eat from the sacrifice in 2 days from now, outside the time. That is prohibited. Even the thought of it, even if he doesn't do it, is prohibited, and it makes that sacrifice invalid. And that's a problem not only for the Kohen who violates, but also for the person that brought the Korban, because now they're going to have to bring another one. Now, if the Kohen, the Mishnah test says, if the Kohen does it on purpose, I don't know why he would do this on purpose, but if he does, then the Kohen has to pay the person who brought the Korban for the amount of the Korban, the amount of the animal, so he could bring another one. So we can derive from this Mishnah that if the Kohen did it by mistake, he just made a mistake, an error in the calendar, he thought it was permitted on Tuesday, he didn't realize it was Monday, and so if he did it by mistake, then it is still pigul, but he doesn't have to pay back the person that brought it, right? But nevertheless, the sacrifice is still no good, right? Sorry to the guy who brought it, who's going to have to pay for another one. Now, how does this relate to us? If we say that this Kohen in general is an agent of heaven, well, then that's why when he does, even though he does a bad job, messes up, makes it pigul, it still is pigul, because he was doing his job as a messenger from heaven, but he did a bad job, so it's pigul. that would make sense. But the other way would not. Why should it be pigul? Let's say I'm the one bringing the korban, and he comes and tells me it was pigul. I could say to him, if he's really my messenger, I would say to him, I made you an agent for my benefit, to do a good job. I did not make you an agent to mess it up. And therefore, I can retroactively undo my messengership. It's not really retroactively. It's more that it's an implicit condition, right? I sent you to do a good job. Just like if I, make you an agent to go and sell something on my behalf, and then you mess it up totally and you sell it at the wrong price, right? So I could say that was not a valid agency. So to here, so that is invalid agency, and therefore, Mr. Kohen, when you had that wrong thought, you were not acting as my agent. And if you were not acting as my agent, and you did not have authority to perform this sacrifice, then that improper thought that you had would not make it pigul, because it's only pigul if you're authorized to sacrifice this animal. But since you were not authorized, because I would not have made you a messenger if I knew you were going to mess it up, then it should not be pigul. So based on this, we are attempting to prove that all sacrifices are in all sacrifices the Kohen is an agent of heaven, because if in any case it was an agent of a person, then you wouldn't have a law of pigul. Okay, so that's the attempted proof that is in fact an agent of heaven, but we reject the proof and we say regarding pigul, the pasuk says it will not be counted for him. Literally, that means that the sacrifice will not be valid, right? It will not count for him. If he has to bring korban chatat, he'll have to bring another korban chatat. But we also learn from this lo yachashev, he cannot think of it, right? And from there we learn mikom makom, in any way. If the Kohen thinks the wrong thought, that he's going to eat it at the wrong time, even if he did so without the consent of the owner, these words yechashev lo mikom makom say in any case, whether it was with the consent of the owner or without the consent of the owner. That's a stringency regarding pigul, that it becomes pigul nevertheless, even if he is in general, Kohen is in general a messenger of the person bringing it, and even if that person says, I would never have made him a messenger, and so it turns out he was not a messenger, nevertheless, that animal still will become pigul, and so we end up without any final answer here, although the Talmud elsewhere does say that the Kohen is a messenger of heaven, and we'll get back more into this statement of Rabbi Yochanan on the next daf. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.